Welcome to this week's episode of the Prep Athletics Podcast. I'm happy to have joining us this week author and former D1 athlete and parent of D1 athletes, Kirsten Jones. Now, we go through a lot in this podcast that I think parents are going to love, and players too, but it's our first real podcast interview with a parent of two kids that have played prep school basketball. So in this conversation, we talk about how she first heard about prep schools. Once she did hear about it, who did she then talk to about the next steps? What kind of due diligence did she do? How did her kids end up choosing these prep schools? And then from there, we talk about from prep school, how they chose their college. One of them is currently in the transfer portal. We get into that. We talk about her transferring from one volleyball to a school to another when she was back as a college athlete, and more. She's also got a book coming out called Raising Empowered Athletes. It's coming out in August. I'm going to get it for parenting and doing the best I can with it. And I think for anyone else listening out there, when it comes out, be something else you want to look into. So I love this podcast. She's got great advice on how to parent correctly in the sports world as well. Some great suggestions. So without further ado, enjoy our podcast with Kirsten Jones. Welcome to the Prep Athletics Podcast. This is Cory Heitz.
Some battles. I'm not sure if they got us. If they did, maybe.
So you will get better as a player during that year.
So it was kind of exciting. Like, oh yeah, somebody wants me.
Kirsten, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Cory.
So I wanted to have you on as a parent to get your perspective on the whole prep school process, because we've had plenty of coaches on. And I've given my opinion a lot, but we've never had a parent on before. And you're in a pretty unique position where two of your sons have gone through prep schools, and we're going to get into that later. But where did you first hear about prep schools, and when did you think it was a good idea for your first son to even look at that option?
Yeah, great question. And actually not that long ago. So we've lived all over. These are all the places we've lived. But the last 8 years we've been in Los Angeles. And when my oldest was a junior in high school, he did with his AAU team, did an East Coast tour. And when I think he was playing at Dartmouth or one of the prep, the Ivies, and our mutual friend, Alex Pope, saw him playing, and he approached him and said, "Hey, I would love to have you come play for me. You know, do you know anything about prep school?" And at the time, he's like, "No, I have no idea." But he came home, Mom, I'm going to move to Vermont. And I was like, "What?" And a week later, I get a phone call, a FaceTime actually, from Alex Pope, who's on his honeymoon in New Zealand, wanting to talk to me about getting my son to come to Vermont. And I'm like, "Why are you calling me on your honeymoon?" But he was saying, "Hey, I've got this great opportunity for your son." And then he kind of unfolded what it's about. And the more we dug into it, my husband and I, my son is a late bloomer. And so for parents who have kids who are late bloomers, it's hard to be seen. It's one thing if you're LeBron's son and you're, 6'8" and 280. But if you're, both of my boys, my husband's 6'5", but both of my boys were 5'8", 130 pounds soaking wet freshman year. And it's just hard to compete. And then this is all pre-COVID, but hard to compete as it is. And then you add COVID to it. It was just too hard to be seen and to get recruited. So with our first one, when CJ said, "I really want to do this," when we looked into it, we thought, another year of development, a year kind of taking your foot off the brake academically. Yes, you take classes. Yes, you have a curriculum. Yes, it still matters. Yes, you have to show up, but you can basically get a test drive being away from home without all of the pressures. Honestly, I don't see any downside except for, there are no guarantees in life. No, I mean, I get parents ask me that all the time. "Oh, okay, so if you do that, for sure you'll get a scholarship." No, you don't. There are no guarantees. Death and taxes. That's it. But if your kid's like one of those kids, and both of mine were, that they, just like that's all their passion and that's all they really wanted, why not? Because, 10 years from now, I just said, you don't want to look back and go, "Gosh, if I had had another year of development, what if, I could have had an opportunity to play at the next level." And again, we rolled the dice, and there were no But when we talked to Coach Pope, he said, no, I totally see an opportunity for him to play at the next level, and I can help him get there. And so we were like, we're all in if you're all in. And CJ said, absolutely. So
Perfect.
it worked
Now,
out.
walk me through this, though. Did you just talk to Coach Pope and Vermont Academy, or did you, when you got reached out to by Pope, did you start looking at other options?
B. So yeah, as soon as we found out about that, then I reached out to Robert Eichart, who we ended up kind of transitioning to play for BTI, which is here in Los Angeles. He's an amazing coach and leader, and he does a great job of just like, here are 20 schools that I know, and this is what I would recommend. And I recommend to all parents, like, cast a wide net. Look at, so we took 20, and then I did all the research on all the 20, and I limited it down to 4 or 5. With CJ, because of the timing, we didn't have time. I think we visited 3 or 4. But if you can, go visit them, go meet with the coach, go see he needs to picture himself being there. He or she needs to picture themselves being there and seeing if they fit in. And, Vermont Academy happens to be in the middle of the woods, right? Like, it's in the middle of nowhere. So you got to know what you're signing up for. And once you know, you can get more facts. And that, kind of leads into our second child. Worcester Academy recruited Parker, and then they also had recruited CJ. And so once we started to go through the process a second time with Parker, we did the same exact process. We looked at 20 schools. We went and visited 5. We went to South Kent, we went to Blair, we went to New Hampton, we went to Worcester, and then allowed him to see, just like you're doing a college vetting process. And I really believe, unless you can picture yourself there and you've gone through that, there are going to be bumps when they get there. It is going to, once you get to about November, December, it's cold, it's dark, I'm away from home for the first time. You can't have it be your decision. It needs to be their decision, so that not if, but when things kind of start to get bumpy, or you get hurt, or you're sick, or whatever, you're like, oh, I got this. And I think that happened for both of them. Was they really, actually CJ, I think, said by November, so how often should I wash my sheets, Mom? Like they haven't ever had to experience what it's like being away from home. So vetting it is a really important part of the process, which maybe you'll get into a little more. But another part of that is making sure that coaching staff needs your son's position. And you can't just be the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th guy on the roster. You need to be one of the key guys, so that you can make sure you only have a year if you're going to do the post grad, if you're not reclassifying. So if you've only got a year, you really, you've got to be able to hit the deck running and make an impact.
That's true, but here's a counter to that, right? Let's say you're going to be the 9th, 10th, or 11th kid, but you love that coach. You love that school. You know that the players in front of you are going to be getting you better on a daily basis. So those are the decisions I have with families all the time, is like, yeah, you can be the man here, but to me, when picking a prep school, my baseline is always go based on the coach, right? Whether it's, the guy's going to be doing your skill set sessions, whether he's determining your playing time, but ultimately he's going to be the guy calling college coaches on your behalf. And, a lot of kids go to prep schools for all the academics, this and that, but let's not kid ourselves. All my clients are going for basketball, right? And the coach is going to have a big part of that process. So that's kind of the advice I give. But let me ask you this, because I think parents will want to know this. You said you started out with 20 prep schools that Robert gave you to look at, and you narrowed it down to 5. Talk to me on what your research process was and how you narrowed it down. What factors were you looking at in your due diligence?
I mean, mostly in getting Robert's point of view, because we didn't know any of those coaches, and him knowing where CJ in the first case and Parker in the second case would fit in. And to your point, like, okay, you can be the 9th or 10th guy, but you've got to know that guy's got to advocate for you. That coach has got to advocate for you. And also, when my younger son saw CJ go through the process and that he was in the middle of nowhere, he was like, I'm not going to a school in the middle of nowhere. So, it's also dependent on the kid. So, Worcester is a bigger town. It had more going on. It was like when we went and visited, Parker really liked Blair too, which is in the middle of nowhere, but it's a bigger campus. So it had a bigger feel to it. He actually liked South Kent, but he had just come from an all boys school. And he's like, I don't know that I want to do another year. I've just done 4 years of high school in an all boys high school. So yeah, vetting kind of came down to just talking to the coaches, getting on the phone with each of those coaches, hearing what they thought of, sending them tape so that they could evaluate Parker if they hadn't seen him play live, which most of them hadn't, and then knowing if there was a fit. And quite honestly, I mean, I can say this now, we went to Blair and my son was like, this is like Harry Potter. I want to come here. And quite honestly, Joe was amazing. And he just said, I'll be honest with you. I just signed a kid from Syracuse. I don't need his position. So it was like, oh, okay. So it needs to be a two-way street. And I'm glad he was that honest with us because again, it would have been a bummer if he was like, oh, I'm all in on going there and him not getting to play, which is the whole point. Like you said, the whole point was to be able to put yourself in a position to get a scholarship or to get a play in college. So.
Yeah. And you just mentioned earlier, like the crystal ball, right? So let's say he did commit to the right fitting coach, right? Which he did Alex. Between when you committed in August, if Alex gets a high major point guard delivered to him, he's going to take him, right?
Yes.
So, families are always asking, well, how do I know if my son's going to play or, what college are you going to go to? And I say, there's no crystal ball for this. Like that's why I always revert back to what I said earlier. You got to go for the coach because guess what? If better players do come in, even after school starts, which happens in some places, you've got to be prepared for that. But guess what? That's how college basketball is going to be. So we're preparing you in all these other things. Get ready for roster changes, things not being exactly like you wanted. And like you mentioned, your son struggling in November, December, that's the adversity that every kid goes to. But the cool part about going through that at prep school is you're going through that at prep school. And once you get to a college campus, you're going to hit the ground running because you've gone through all that adversity. You had to learn how to make a grilled cheese sandwich with an iron. You had to learn how to get up without mom and dad telling you, et cetera, et cetera. So there is no crystal ball, right? And we're seeing that now, which we'll get into later with the transfer portal. Like kids are picking colleges and things change even more at that level than the prep.
And let's be honest, that's happening in high schools now. And I get parents all the time, oh, this coach is trying to recruit. Well, of course, she's trying to win. So she's going to get the best players she can get. I mean, they have to too. So they're never going to say no. If a 6'8" guy walks in their front door, they're going to say, welcome this way. So, that's part of the whole, and that's life. And that's, again, what we're trying to teach our kids is if you really want it, then you make the decision with all the information you have in that moment based on the, what you know about yourself and what you know about the program. And, you go all in and say, okay, I'm going to give it all, and I know some kids who signed the day before, CJ actually was lucky and had offers before he showed up on campus because of what happened in the summer league. Actually, both of them did. But some kids don't get signed until right now. We're talking April, May. So you don't know when exactly it could happen. But the coaches that I have worked with, they're on the phone constantly figuring out, if they know that you as a family have invested so much money and time and effort and energy that if they're upfront with you, they're not going to allow your kid to come to their school unless they're willing to do the work as well and be honest with where, what level. And that's part of the issue too with parents is, well, my kid's high major. Well, no, he's a 6-foot point guard. He's a D2, D3 player. And if those two don't mix, then that could be a problem too, right?
Yeah, and to talk current, we're recording this on May 24th right now. I've still got 3 prep school postgrads, 6, 7, and above, waiting on D1, and they feel like they're D1 players, and yeah, they probably are, right? But we're getting down to the wire here, to where in this current post-pandemic era, like former D1 players are dropping all the time to different levels. So what are you going to do? Pop into a spot that might not be the right fit, or maybe go D2 or D3 to a place that really likes you. So I think a lot of this stems from the expectations going into this year. And me and prep school coaches beat families over the head, and I'm sure you do too, with all your advocacy, that you have no idea what's going to come out of this year. Like you might be a mid-major player in the past. It just things are tougher and tougher. But the worst case scenario is you've at least got an advocate and a prep school coach that can help you through this whole process. That does it every single year, right? So that's why I think it's so valuable. And someone that knows better, not going to BS you.
Well, and I think your point is exactly the one that resonates for me the most, which is go where you're wanted. Because if you go to a school just because, like, had my son just gone to Blair because he liked the school, then he probably wouldn't have been as happy there. Whereas when Worcester said, come this way, we want to make sure you're going to be happy, there's a better fit. And my older son is going through that right now, which maybe we'll get into. He's in the transfer portal, and he was D1, and he's now looking at D3s. And you know what? And he's got some D3s that are amazing schools. And maybe that's the best fit for him right now with where he is in his life. And that's okay. Like, it really shouldn't be about the level. It should be about the fit and finding the place that your kid can thrive. And the number of kids that I see, they want the name on the back of the jersey. And is that really what's going to make them happy? Some kids are like, okay, I don't care. I just want to be on the roster. But most kids want to go somewhere where they can be, at least get on the floor by their third or fourth year. They're not really there to, carry the towels and carry the water bottles, right? Like, they really, if you want to put in all that work, most kids are like, yeah, this is about me trying to find the right place where I can be an impact player.
You'd think so, but I mean, if I had $1 every time, Kirsten, that me and prep school coaches and parents say the 2 words "right fit," I'd be very wealthy, because I say that over and over again, and yet it gets ignored. But I get it. Like, I was a D1 or bust kid myself, and I've told the story many times. But I chose a college because it was D1. Absolutely, it was the opposite. It was the wrong fit for me, but it was D1, and I had that be D1 because of all the other members of my family that did it. So I get that feeling. But I also didn't live in this current environment, right? Where we know a lot more now, have a lot more access to information, and the pandemic, which in the portal and everything. So let's get to that and your oldest son. So first, he had offers going into Vermont Academy. When he ended up choosing his school, how did he choose it? Did he choose it on his own? Was Alex helping? Was BTI helping? Were you guys helping? Walk me through that process, and then we'll get to the second part of his process of picking his school for a second time.
Yeah. So BTI was heavily involved, as was Alex. And gratefully, out of the summer session, the 2 back-to-back sessions, he had like 15 offers. And so we went and visited a lot of schools, did unofficial visits on our own dime just to go see. Because again, you got to be able to picture that I could be there to meet the staff, to meet some of the players, to be able to see, can I imagine myself there? And then once he got to Vermont, he actually ended up doing 3 official visits, and to Penn, to BU, and to Bucknell. And when he got to BU, he was like, maybe it was being in the middle of the woods too, but being in a major city felt really good. He loved the guys. He fell in love with the guys. In fact, one of the guys that was on his Bucknell visit became his roommate, has been his best friend for the last 3 years. They both committed to BU at the same time after their Bucknell visits. But it ended up just being a feeling that he had, and it checked all the boxes. And CJ came up with a little saying, or somewhere along the line, he said, I'm looking for not my 4-year plan, but my 40-year plan. And he would talk about that with coaches, which is, yes, it's about what happens from a basketball perspective, but how does this opportunity set me up beyond basketball? Because as we know, the ball stops bouncing for us all. Even LeBron, is going to have to put the ball down now. So at some point you'll have to pivot. And what is trying to help him, it was his decision. It was never our decision, because he's the one that's got to go there and embrace it and do the work and, and live it. So, but he was getting Robert's voice from BTI, was getting Alex's voice. He was getting, all the different coaching voices. And then he was, we were the sounding board and saying, where do you see yourself really fitting in?
Perfect. Now, talk to me. He was at BU, and now he put his name in the portal. Would you share why he's deciding to transfer, and then what that process has been like from his decision till now?
So he got there and COVID hit when he got to BU, and there were 5 guys in his room. I think they left their room, whatever. It was like prison, 3 hours a day or whatever. They didn't even meet the other half of the team. By December, they were practicing with masks and everything. He got COVID in December, was literally quarantined behind Fenway by himself in a building by himself for 10 days over Christmas. It was lovely. Came back like January 3rd, collided with Suk, the largest guy on the team, and got a massive concussion in January of his freshman year. So his whole freshman year was pretty much a wash, as it was for most kids, because that was COVID year. And then the next 2 years, as you've probably talked about a lot, which is, everybody got their COVID year. So first you had 9 guys ahead of you, then you had 6 guys ahead of you. Then I think this year, I had like 7 or 8 guys. He never really got into the rotation the way he hoped he would. And there was just some, it was a differences of what coach thought was going to help him win. When he did the math, one of the things I love about D1 programs now, which they didn't have when I played, is they go do summer school every year. And so every summer he's taken a couple classes. So when he started to look at his BU career, he realized if I take 2 summer school sessions, I can graduate in August. So that's his plan. He's like, why don't I just go ahead and graduate, and then I can go on to grad school. And he still has 2 years of eligibility. And it's a fit issue, right? And that happens for a lot of kids, and finding the right fit is important. And he was beating himself up over, how did I make this decision? Well, again, a lot of things have happened, and we can only make the best decision from where we are with what we have in the moment. And then things change. And what's fun is he's now, again, going through the process again, but he's looking for different things. He's looking, and he's a little wiser as to what the questions he's asking and, what's important to him. And so now he's, looking at grad schools where, yes, basketball is important, but he's like, I just want to go somewhere where I can really play and have fun and play free. And I don't really care what the level is. I just want to be part of, an integral part of the team and get a degree from a great school.
All right, so walk me through the day he decides to put his name in the portal. What happens next?
You go to your compliance officer, and then they then release you. So he went to the coach first, obviously, and had a discussion with him. And the coach said, I totally support you. I get it. So he supported him, and then he went to compliance, and your name goes into the portal. And again, he's in the portal, but he's not really, because he's graduating. So, I read on the NC2A website the other day, 52% of Division I basketball players do not graduate from high school or from college.
That's
right?
Horrible stat. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that staggering? So
is that D1 or is that D1, 2, and 3?
All D1. Yeah. 52% do not graduate. So CJ's graduating. So again, what I think the Patriot League and a lot of these schools care about is matriculation and helping. Again, no, they're not trying to raise, you're not trying to, go pro from Patriot League. You're trying to raise, a couple do, but most are there because they want a great education. And so I think it's a win-win in that CJ's graduating. So he's another, kid that Coach Jones gets to say, hey, I helped him through the process. And now, CJ gets to go on and get a graduate degree and gets to play for 2 more years. So again, and I transferred halfway through mine, and I was such a much better volleyball player at 22, 23 than I was at 18, right? So and that's where the prep year comes back in is I think it pays dividends, in the long run for athletes, because you only get better and stronger and smarter and, become a better leader, know who you are more. So you're more comfortable with taking risks and more comfortable getting feedback. And it's just, I think it's such a great situation.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you on all that. But once he puts his name in the transfer portal, does he sit back and let school start reaching out to him, or does he have to be proactive, or is he working with his BU coach and BTI still? Like, walk me through that, because I want parents to realize, and players, like, once I do this, like, I want them to know like what's going to happen next and how they should proceed. So any advice on that would be great.
Yeah. So yes, all of the above. The reality is he doesn't have a lot of stats because he didn't play a lot of minutes in any of the games. So I'm sure if you're high major and you have 15 points and, 10 rebounds a game, your phone starts ringing off the hook. In his case, it didn't, but he got, I would say 10 or 11 schools that were at, all different levels that started showing interest. And yes, they were reaching out to BTI. They've, reached out to Coach Jones. In fact, Coach Jones called him yesterday, just checking in. I want to make sure you find a place, so he's absolutely doing the right thing. But the answer is, again, back to, for parents, it's his decision and it's his life. And as much as it hurts us, and it's so painful to watch them go through this, it's his choice and he needs to own it. And this is a part of the adulting, this might be the biggest lesson he gets out of this whole thing. Right. Is I have to advocate for myself and nobody's going to do it for me. As I mentioned earlier, I did this exact thing. And of course, my parents knew nothing about sports. So I put together, I typed up a letter and put together my VHS tape and mailed it to a few colleges back in the day. And I guess I wasn't done because I ended up going, from San Diego State to William and Mary. but it wasn't because there was any portal or anything. And I guess it was one of those good lessons where like, if you still want this, it's out there, but nobody's, most of the time, they say over 50%, 60%, I think I read, are not landing anywhere because which is harsh. So don't just think I'm going to put my name in the portal and the phone's going to start ringing off. In fact, one of CJ's teammates I know went in and came back out because, again, figure out, we had him do all his homework. How many credits do you need to graduate? Like, because do you want to graduate or you want to transfer undergrad or do you want to try to do grad transfer? If you're going to transfer undergrad, like when I transferred, you lose a ton of credits because no university is going to say, oh yeah, come to our school and in 1 year, we'll give you a diploma from our university. You're going to have to do at least 2 years at the new school. Well, are you willing to give up all that you've already accomplished, in your academic record? So you have to look at all of the factors. Is it about playing time? Is it about, is it about culture? Is it about, why are you doing it? Figuring out your why. And that's what we really sat with CJ and asked him all of those questions about what was important to him and what he wanted to get out of the next step. And then we've just been the sounding board. Like he's got to go visit a school next week here in Southern California. He just flew back last night from New York and, he's all excited about it. And maybe it'll be the right fit. Let's go see, but let him drive the process.
Yeah. And the thing is too about the portal, things move fast. You have to move fast. So you might not get a chance to visit, might need to take a leap of faith as well, which is not ideal either,
Right. Yeah. And particularly having been burned or whatever, COVID was really hard. And the coaches that I've interviewed, they said we've had, and particularly grad transfers, we've had luck where particularly if it's a 1-year grad transfer, like, I've got his one D1 volleyball coach I talked to is like, I've gotten one that was all in and she, totally embraced the whole system. And then I had one who, well, I'm only going to be here for a couple months. So why bother? So, it's a risk on both sides, right? So it is important to vet by talking to who do you know that knows them? What players do you know? I mean, my son's gone through the roster and called 3 or 4 different kids on the team that he knows that, he's looking at one school in New York. Talk to the players, talk to these coaches who've played for that coach, find out, like, do as much vetting as you can, because yes, you're right. It's going to be a quick decision, but you don't want to go in blind.
Yeah. And I love it. You said this so many times throughout our conversation, Kirsten, is that you got to do your due diligence. You got to do your vetting. You have to. It takes time. It takes effort, but you've got to do that to see if there's any cracks in any of these programs, right? And absolutely talking to players that are currently there, but also ones that are not there anymore, both prep school and college, is key, right? Because then you're not hearing just all the positive from the coach. So, and feel free to talk to parents too.
Yes.
That's a great resource. Talk to me about why you decided to transfer back in the day when transferring wasn't as well known as it is today.
Well, I grew up in Montana. I played more basketball than I did volleyball. I was a better basketball player coming out of high school than volleyball, and had an offer to play at University of Montana, play both basketball and volleyball, but got an inspiration to go try out for the junior national team in Colorado Springs. And the San Diego State assistant coach was there. And I was like, oh, San Diego, by the beach. That sounds amazing. Why not? So never having met the coach, never having met the team, never having been to San Diego, I thought, let's go. So I didn't vet the process. And my parents were like, if that's what you want to do, go. And they supported me in doing that. But, again, not a shocker that it didn't end up being a great fit. He was a very good X's and O's coach, but he was not a great human. And he didn't treat me well. And when it got down to it, my parents were like, look, we're tired of you calling home crying, because was literally, unfortunately fairly abusive. And so they said, we could care less if you ever play volleyball again. But if you do want to play, then, your older sister went to UVA, you should talk to her. You should talk, so I called a couple people, and my older sister said, oh, there's this little school down south, William and Mary. So I was like, I sent this woman a letter, and, I got a phone call, on my answering machine. This is Debbie Hill from the William Mary volleyball program. You need to come to William Mary. I know exactly who you are. And I went and played for this woman, and she was in my wedding. I talked to her last week. I had the most amazing experience. And that's what's fun. At least I can share with CJ, okay, this didn't work out exactly the way you wanted it to, but if I hadn't gone through what I went through, I would have never gotten the gift that I got on the end. And I believe he can get that too. And again, there's no shame in it not working out. That's part of life. And again, the whole point of this entire journey of life is figuring out who we are. So if he's learned some lessons, that's given better tools so that he can become more prepared and know who he is. I mean, it's kind of like dating. Like, I don't think you should marry the first person you meet either. So dating a few different people and understanding what your values are is going to make you a much better mate if and when you decide that's what you want to do too.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thanks for sharing that. That's a great story there. And back in our days, we didn't have as much technology, so couldn't go on the internet. It was hard to find things, so it was a lot of word of mouth. But we did it. We didn't know any better, right?
Right. Yeah.
I want to go to your younger son, Parker, now. So we talked about, how each kid chose their own prep school for different reasons. We talked about how CJ, ultimately decided on BU. And now Parker, this past year, he's recently committed to a school, or this year he has. Walk me through his process and how it was similar or different than your older sons.
So when COVID hit, Parker was a junior, and here in Los Angeles, they had basketball, but it was very limited. And to be honest, out of my three kids, he really kind of went into a funk because they were doing online school for 18 months. He was living in his pajamas. I mean, yes, he got out to play some basketball, but it was really, really hard on these kids. And I work with a lot of clients who are still struggling with the outcomes of having, the lack of socialization and everything. So he went through that year. They played some games with club as well. And then he got a new high school coach for his senior year. And they had a phenomenal year as a team and then he individually. But he was sitting here at this table in March of his senior year, having zero interest, zero offers. He's a bigger kid. He played both basketball and actually volleyball in middle school, but basketball and soccer throughout his. So he's a little bit more athletic. He's got a little bit, more tools in his tool belt. And he was sitting at the kitchen table saying, this isn't going to happen. And I don't know who I am without it. And we were trying to help him say, there's options. And then we were wondering, gosh, are we just putting a lot of pressure on him just because his brother went and did this? Doesn't mean you need to go do this. This is an option, but it doesn't have to. If you want to pivot away from basketball altogether, again, it's your choice. So it was quite a journey for him to realize, and we needed to give him the choice to say, no, I want to do this, not, well, come on, you're 6'7" and you got all these talent. And no, like, that's not the way this works. Again, if it's driven by us, it's not going to work. So it took a while. And then, I said, well, do you want to go look at some prep schools? You want to talk to, Robert? Same kind of process. And so he did. And we went in the fall of his senior year. So a little bit earlier because we had a heads up on it. And in October of his senior year was when we went and visited all the schools. And after he'd done all the visits, and he was just like, and Worcester and Coach Sullivan, Dan and Jamie are both just such amazing guys. And they had recruited CJ. So we already knew them. It felt like family. And as Jamie said, I'm not letting two Joneses get away from me. So he was so all in on Parker. And again, back to go where you're wanted. It felt so natural that it was, kind of a no-brainer. It was a much easier choice. Obviously, they had, three other high majors that were coming. So it was attractive to Parker because he's like, I want to go somewhere where I'm going to get better. I want to go somewhere that's, a bigger city. I want to go somewhere that has good academics. I want to go somewhere that I wanted. It checked every box. So he was just really excited about that opportunity. And then similarly, he flew out there last June and played with Worcester in that prep school summer tournament. And that was when he started to kind of generate interest. And then he had, I think, maybe 10 or 11 offers by the time he got to Worcester in the fall. But then he took all fall and, he really said, I want to make sure I make the right choice. And there was a lot of pressure, because to your point, I mean, we kept hearing, well, these offers don't stick around now because of COVID. People are taking them really fast. So you should take them really fast. So it was hard to just be like, no, take your time, but hurry up. No, but you want him to make his choice. So he didn't, I mean, he had offers in September, but he didn't make a choice to go to Colgate until after Thanksgiving. And to Langle's credit, I had a great call with Coach Langle in like early November. And he said, when I was 18, because I thought he was calling me to like put the screws in. And he was actually the opposite. He said, when I was 18, I was down to 2 schools. I just couldn't make up my mind. He goes, so my dad made it up for me. And he goes, but Parker doesn't need to make up his mind. He said, we believe in him. We want him. We know, we are here for him. I said, but, you're going to move on in 30 days. He goes, no, I'm going to wait for Parker. And
Wow.
I know that's a very privileged situation, right? And like to hear him say that was like, whoa, Parker, they're all in. And again, back to going where you're wanted. And I think that was ultimately what sold him on them was they were there from the beginning. They were one of the first schools that started showing up. In fact, Cam Crocker canceled a flight to Atlanta so that he could watch Parker play 5 more games. He's like, just so you know, canceling my flight because I really want to stay here and watch him the entire weekend. So it was, but that kind of, when they start to show that kind of interest, that's a sign that they're going to be there for you, and that's what you're looking for. Again, fit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great. He ended up at Colgate, and now that both of them have done post-grad years, what were, for both kids, what were like their 2 biggest challenges that you as a parent saw from your end?
Ooh, good question. I'd love to say, or I guess the natural answer would be being away from home for the first time, but we've lived in a lot of different places. And I just feel like, and I don't know, my dad always said you got to go at least, he had a 500-mile rule. Like you had to be at least 500 miles away from home so that you didn't come home on the weekends to do your laundry. So there was never an expectation that they have to go away, but it was never like a big deal, right? And so I don't think either of them really struggled with being away from home. I know a lot of parents say that. They're like, I can't imagine them being that far. It's quieter, and a lot of your friends are now off at college doing keg stands or tailgating or,
Right.
Rushing a fraternity, and you're still in high school. So I think that is, again, both of them had their why. If you have your why am I doing this? And if your outcome is because you want to get to that next level, then that's not going to seem like a sacrifice. And Parker had, I think I mentioned the other day, 5 or 6 other friends from LA that were different prep schools, but I think they all had made that choice. Like they were like, no, I really want to see if I can play at the next level. So they were willing to forgo, that first year of college.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I have a really good answer about, yes, there were some dark nights of the soul of missing home, but it goes by so fast, like it's not like, you're hardly there. They're playing, they come home for Thanksgiving and then they have, Parker had 10 days off at Christmas, which was amazing. High school basketball, they have 48 hours off at Christmas or 36 hours off at Christmas. So it actually was a longer break than normal. So that was very generous. He had 2 weeks off at spring break. So he was able to come home. And now he just got home for the year. He's going to fly back out in 2 weeks for graduation, or next week for graduation. But it went by really fast.
Yeah. And the term coaches and I use is it's a 9-month business trip for a post-grad.
Exactly.
Because it goes by in a blur. But, I told my parents before I went to my post-grad year that I might call home wanting to quit. And I said, just listen to me, support me, but do not let me come home because I'll probably be in a dark spot, which I think I called home during my academy time 4 times. And this included college too, because Air Force Academy is a different animal than most places. But 4 times they just listen. They go, okay, you told us these calls would come. We support you and love you, but you need to stick it out. And they're right. And I'm glad I had that conversation with them because if they'd have capitulated, I might have, who knows what my life would have been. If they'd have been like, it's okay, Cory, come on home. We'll take care of you, which a lot of parents do nowadays, which you're very experienced with. My life would be completely different. So that's a little tip for parents and kids, like just, and I've only had a couple clients that have left during the year and that's been for extenuating circumstances, but you're going to hit dark days, especially at Saxton's River, Vermont.
Right. No, the umbilical cord that we're now tethered to them, when we look back on we had one phone on the end of the hall that you would call, I don't know, every other Sunday you'd call home. So when you failed the test or you got broken up with, or you had a fight or you had a bad game, by the time you talk to your parents, that was all ancient history. And now they're live tweeting their life to you. And I think it's too much. It's too much on the parents and it's too much on the kids. And again, I'm hiking with friends every weekend. I have a group of 4 of us that we go, and to hear the things that we're talking about is like, well, and then he woke up and he had a stomach ache. I'm like, why do you know what's going on with him Saturday morning at 9? Like, you shouldn't know this information, right? Like, we would have never known that. And I think it's stressful on both sides.
Talk to me, since you're in this field of advocating for parents and athletes and whatnot. When did all this start? What do you know the defining moment when the helicopter parenting started?
Well, it's funny you should ask that. So I've got a book coming out, and actually the full first section of the book is about that. And really, it's kind of 3 parts is my, the research that I've done over the last 7 years and watching this unfold as my kids is growing up was, in the 70s and 80s is when women started rejoining the workforce. In the 50s and 60s, maybe 24% of women were in the workforce. When we got to the 70s and 80s, that doubled. So now all of a sudden you have both mom and dad working.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do with the kids? So all of a sudden this problem happened where you have latchkey kids. Okay, so we need something for the kids to do. At the same time, I think it was right around 1980, 81, this report comes out that No Child Left Behind, that in fact, we're falling behind the rest of the world academically. So now all of a sudden this pressure of our kids aren't as smart. So you have kids not with nothing to do, with parents who are both working. You have, kids who are not as smart. In 1981 is when ESPN is founded. So now you're watching television 24/7, almost with sports. And at the same time, in the 70s and 80s is when Andre Agassi and Tiger Woods and Nadia Comaneci and, all of, Todd Marinovich and all of these athletes start showing up on your screen. And wow, what happened? And how did they become so good? And when you add the 10,000 hour rule, which, famously or infamously around, if we just apply more hours of practice, they're going to get better. I think it started all from a very good place where, okay, dads are going to get more involved. They're going to help coach because after work, I can go be with my kid. But then that started to then branch out into, well, you can't just play rec. Now you need to play. I'm going to start my own club because my kid's not getting enough playing time. So now I can control the environment that my kid's in. And what did it lead to was, now 30 years on, we've got, I call it the professionalization of youth sports, where what used to be happening only at the tippy top pro level, it's not even college or high school. It's down into the middle school level where, I coach 9 and 10-year-old volleyball, and I've got parents that come up to me hat in hand apologizing that, I'm so sorry, I know this isn't going to work out because my 9-year-old's never played. And that's just so sad to me that we've gotten to a place where it's not okay just to go out in the street and throw the ball, that you're not just going to go play pickup, that you don't get a chance to just play free. In fact, another client I had a couple of weeks ago, she was talking about her 12-year-old girls at a volleyball tournament, and the girls were all dancing around. And the one girl said, "Oh, I can't do that." And she said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Well, the college coaches may be watching me and they wouldn't recruit me." She's 12. Like, why would you? Of course, college coaches aren't recruiting her, but somebody's putting it in her head that she needs to be performing at all times when she's in a gym. And 5 years before she's ever going to even be recruited. So it's adding to this pressure and anxiety and overwhelm and shutdown, and kids are quitting. And over 70% of kids quit youth sports by age 13 now. Why? Because it's not fun. Why? Because the adults have sucked all the fun out of it, because we've said, it can't just be rec. You can't just play t-ball. We need to win. We need to have, we need to travel to Sweden this summer. They're 8. Come on. If you're any good, you've got to go overseas. It's gone off the rails. A $20 billion industry. It's bigger than the NFL. And we've all bought into it. Yes.
All right. So great sharing there. Give advice. I got 2 daughters under 6. You are the puppet master for how I raise them, right? Whatever you say, I do. Give me your prescription.
3 F's. They should try everything. anything that you see them showing inclination to. And when you say, okay, I want to be a ballerina, awesome. We're going to try that. And we're going to try it for a season. And we're focused on the 3 F's: friends, fun, and fundamentals. And through the course of that season, we may love it, we may hate it, but we're going to go through sign up for the whole session. And if we're done with that, and you know what, I don't like ballet, I want to go try tap dance, or I want to go play ping pong, or whatever the next thing is, but try as many things for as long as you can. The best athletes are multi-sport athletes. And when you look back to, back to Ohio State, said over 80% of their football team were multi-sport athletes. Gone is the day where you have multi-sport athletes, because they can't afford to play more than one sport because of overuse, injury, and mostly because of time. Because if you're a freak athlete and you happen to be, again, blessed genetically early on, then coaches will say, no problem, miss practice. But if you're a late bloomer, there's no way you're going to be allowed to miss, practices and get to play. So you have to pick your poison. But I would say, if you can, and this is, I know, hard, particularly in a place like Los Angeles, but all the way up to age 13 or 14, have them playing multiple sports and have them trying new things and learning new skills. And like I said earlier, I think my oldest would admit, I tried to get him to play volleyball and he's like, no, I only want to play basketball. And our younger one is a better athlete because he played soccer for so much longer. He was using different muscles. He was, thinking about and seeing the field and now the court differently. So I would say friends, fun, and fundamentals for your age, which is I heard Steve Kerr interviewed a couple of weeks ago, and, what are you most focused on for the playoffs, obviously, before they got out? And he's like, oh, we just want to have fun. I get it. He needs to win. Of course, he's all about winning, but you can sense that they play with joy. And if you're not playing with joy, why do it?
Yeah, love that. Thank you for that prescription. 3 F's. I'll keep that in mind. You mentioned your clients, and I know you do coaching for parents. Tell us about your business and how you can help families.
I do motivational speaking and talking. So I work with teams. So like last year, I worked with this high school volleyball team and went on to win the national championship. So I do peak performance, working about how do we, leadership and collaboration and teamwork, which is actually the work I used to do at Nike as well. So it's really fun to then translate that from the corporate world to the athletic world. And then I work one-on-one. I'll get clients who, like, I've got a cute client now who's a soccer player and a track athlete, and she's overcoming an injury, and what is her mindset? And so we all have limiting beliefs. We all have things that hold us up. We all have things that we tell ourselves about what's possible and what's not. So I love helping people figure out what it is. 90% of it's mental. So yes, you have to have the athletic skills, but at a certain point, you've got to allow your skills to take over. So I work one-on-one, I work with teams, and then hopefully this year I'm going to be doing a ton of speaking to schools, to coaches, traveling around the United States. I'm going to go back up to Portland. I'm going to be on the East Coast for sure, to get to the parents. And that's what I hope this book is. When we get pregnant, everyone hands us what to expect when you're expecting, and you read it. I read it 3 times, cover to cover. Oh, it's the size of a jelly bean. I'm doing such a good job. I'm such a great parent. And then you get to Kick and Chase and you're like, where's the book? Like, nobody tells you how to handle this. And awesome. So this is the book. I hope this is the book. That's the book that I wanted to read. And I was a former athlete and I was working at Nike at the time, yet I felt the FOMO. I felt oh my gosh, what if I'm doing this wrong? And, so having the tools to help others is what my big mission is.
And your book, when's it come out?
August 8th, but it's available for pre-sale now. So you can go on Amazon or anywhere books are sold and you can find it there now. So
perfect. And what age range parent do you suggest it for? All of them?
All of them, really.
Okay.
I mean, I have clients up into college. I've had a couple pro athletes. But really this is around, mostly middle school and high school are the majority of my athletes. But I do have a couple college athletes who, again, just want to tune up. They want to check in. And I think the parenting never ends. Again, I'm still parenting and he's 22 and right. I'm leaning back a lot further and trying to, again, allow him to make the decisions. But it starts when they're 3, 4, and 5. I had stories in there about the parents taking over, in kindergarten and taking over the book project, and why the parents all knew what the book report was when I showed up for the picnic meeting, like, why haven't you done the book report, Kirsten? And I'm like, what book report? Well, Parker has a book report and it's due on Monday. And that's when parents start taking over, in kindergarten. And then, they don't let go, and they keep thinking that's what the whole college cheating scandal is about, right? Like it's you're sending him that message: you are not enough. I need to take over because you can't do this. So allowing them to, get a C on the book report or an F on the physics report because they didn't do it when they got to high school is the only way they're going to learn. And we parents are doing that snowplow. Oh, no, I've got to do it. And I'm going to apply to colleges for them. And no, let go. Allow. Maybe he's not supposed to be at that school if he really can't fill out the application himself.
Right. I love that. And I see that with kids too. My clients, like some kids do everything. And then some parents do everything. And then you got to blend. And I'm always, the parents will be like, well, who should the point of contact be? And I'm always like, well, if you want my opinion, it should be the kid. Like he's the one going to prep school. Like he's the one the coaches should reach out to first. And, but everyone's got their own upbringing though. But yeah, the book, August, I'm going to get it myself and read it to get some tips and whatnot. But everyone out there listening to this should absolutely get this, because most listeners to this podcast are parents and players, right? So I think this would be a valuable tool. Some quick hitters here to finish up. All right. These will be fun. Best concert you've ever attended?
I've attended a lot lately, actually. We just saw Chris Stapleton at Stagecoach and he was amazing. So I'm going to go with him.
Oh, we love Chris Stapleton from my home state of Kentucky. He's in fact the only country guy I like. Yeah. So,
right. Yeah. Same. We're not big country fans, but my husband works for Fender Guitar and he plays a Fender. So we are big fans, and he's an amazing musician.
Yeah, absolutely. Best sporting event you've ever attended?
The one that just popped into my mind was the French Open. And when we were living in Europe, just was fun to be in Paris, and we had champagne and, did the whole thing, and it was just, over the top, but it's exactly what you're supposed to do when you're in Paris, right?
Absolutely. What are your hobbies when you're not doing what you're doing?
I've got a 3-year-old white lab puppy who's asleep behind me, and we hike a ton. I still work out a lot. Like my husband and I just did a 6 a.m. workout. I believe I get up every morning and meditate and then journal about my day. And then I go and create it. I really believe setting your intention and allowing your day to flow through you, not let it control you. So you either set your intention and you do it, or it happens to you. So I try to every day set intentions for what it is I want to accomplish. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But it's important to, even at our ages, to go big. And I believe our kids more than anything are watching us. And so I've been trying to get this book published for 7 years. And, it's okay that it hasn't worked out. And it's okay that I'm not, this didn't work out and I didn't get an agent. And like, they need to see that we're also, failing and standing up and trying it all over again. And modeling it is the best way that they're going to learn.
Love that. Great answer there. And last one, favorite movie of all time?
We were just talking about this morning. Princess Bride, for sure. For sure. I love Princess Bride.
Oh, good call. Good classic. Okay. Where can people find you?
Oh, I'm everywhere. Mostly on Instagram at Kirsten Jones Coach. And then the podcast and my website, the podcast's on the website, Raising Athletes with Susie Walton. So Susie and I interview coaches and athletes, and I'd love to have you on too, to talk about all things youth sports and how we can help our kids and help ourselves. I believe you got to apply your own mask to help yourself first before you can help your kids. So KirstenJonesInc.com is my website.
Perfect. Well, Kirsten, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. It was a pleasure to have you on, and you were the first parent after 70 plus episodes that we've had on. So it was going to happen one day. And I think you, with your expertise, with the book coming out, with your sons doing this, with your own college experience, your own international experience, I think is going to provide a lot of great info for our listeners today. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, if you guys like this, be sure to subscribe on all the podcasting platforms. Subscribe on YouTube. If you got any prep school questions, you can reach out to me at coryheitz@gmail.com or go to prepathletics.com, where all tons of great information is, including every podcast we've ever done. And thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Take care.